I have been talking for the past 2 years now about the future of social media, and I thought this year I'd do something different. So I'm going to talk about some disruptive trends that I'm seeing in technology and outlook. And you should know that almost this entire deck is 100% new. I think at the last minute I stuck one other slide in, but it is all new, so you guys are my guinea pigs. So I would love to know at the end of this whether you thought it was helpful, how I could be doing it further. So just to give you an idea, when I look at disruptive trends, I mean, the altimeter is all about looking at disruptions and how companies can take advantage of them. And when you think about disruptions and what are trends, one of the things I did for this, because I'm a researcher, is I went out and looked and found as many technology predictions and trends as I could find. And at my last count was about 109 of them that I looked at over the past couple of weeks. And so I looked at all of them, and I realized that there was a commonality between all of them. None of them really described why they picked these trends to be the ones that they put out as the highlight. So anything from business intelligence and analytics to social media to email to search, on and on and on. Technology trends, enterprise applications, I can go on and on. Look at so many of these. And I thought, wait a minute, if I'm going to pick out what are the most disruptive trends that you have to pay attention to, and especially as marketers and as business people, what should you be looking at? And so that's what I started to do. So one of the things I did first of all was like, okay, what are these trends? And I just picked out a bunch of them. And I don't intend you to look at this, but this is what it felt like going through 109 of these predictions. Looking and trying to figure out, okay, which of these things make sense? And these are really smart people looking at all these trends. So how do you pay attention to each of them? So I decided, it needs a framework. I'm a researcher. I think about these things. I'm an analyst. So my things, the way to think about which disruptions matter. The key reason why disruptions are important is because they are opportunities for you to really move into the market in places where other people haven't discovered those disruptions. Disruptions are also important to understand because they can potentially really hurt your business. So if you're not on top of those trends, you could be losing out. So there are three things that I've looked at consistently across, again, looking at all these trends. First of all, is the user experience. It always comes back to the people who are going to be looking at these trends and adopting them. The first question is it easy for people to use? Is it easy for them to pick it up? And it's kind of intuitive. You know how to use it. You don't need a manual. You don't need somebody to explain to you, well, this is what it is, right? The second part is, does it enable people to connect in new ways? Because if they connect in new ways that they couldn't before, more efficient things to do, then that actually gives them a reason to continue to use it. And this is the whole reason why social has taken off in so many ways. It isn't because, well, gee, we can talk to each other. We could always talk to each other. But we could talk to each other in new ways now that we couldn't before. So user experience is the first one. The second one is the business model, and this is pretty straightforward. Can you make more money from it because of this disruption? Can you make it from new sources, easier, bigger margins? Or can you actually do whatever it is that you were doing at a lower cost than you were before? And the third one takes a little bit of explanation. I call it value network. Some of you may think of it as the ecosystem. But when do new trends come and disrupt the ecosystem? But the way it disrupts the ecosystem isn't that it just kind of like sits there and throws a bomb in it. It actually does it in two very specific ways. Does value change in the terms of the flow? Does it move in different directions? And also does power shift inside of that ecosystem? Because when power shifts, when flows change, those are opportunities for new players to come in or existing players to consolidate their positions. So this is my framework in thinking about the new trends. So looking at 109 of these predictions and trends, looking at them, putting them into a table, rating them and evaluating them, this is what I came up with. Ready? Okay. And I would love to know what I missed too. Okay, well, you see if you guys agree with me. The first one is something I call likeonomics, and I credit Rohit Bhagavat for this. And he defines likeonomics as how personal relationships, individual opinions, powerful storytelling, and social capital are helping brands become more believable. And this is just a like button on Facebook. And it has become so populous now. You can see it everywhere. But what I think about it is that there's a like economy that's happening here. People are paying money to get more likes. But the problem is, the other side of this, people aren't quite sure yet what to do with these likes. So here's an example from Levi's. I think many of you have seen this. It's been around now for a little while, where you can go and like a pair of jeans and share it with your Facebook friends. And you can see if any of your friends have liked the same jeans. Well, that's great, except if you look at me and look at my friends, we are not even close to the same shape. So that's not going to be very useful necessarily. But what if I use Gogobot? Have any of you used Gogobot at all? Anybody? It's travel, right? So you can talk about things. So one of the things I want to do is I would love to go to on African safari this summer. And last summer, I do a lot of adventure travel. Last summer, I went to the Galapagos Islands. So my friends may or may not be caring about whether I go on those trips, but if you ever want to go to Galapagos Islands, definitely talk to me, because it's a fantastic trip. So I will go on to Gogobot and talk about that. And I may share it with my friends, but it's also with, again, a more circumspect group of people like me, who like adventure travel and taking their kids with them on that. So that's a different way of thinking about likes. What do you like in common with other people like you, not necessarily your friends? And then this is a drink in the UK called Innocent Drinks. They make smoothies and fruit drinks and yogurts. Anybody ever seen those things? Well, every year at Christmas time, they ask people to knit these cute little hats to put on top of the bottles. And every time you buy them, they give something like 40 pence to various elderly care and other various charities. And it's all through the month of December. And so what they do is they have people take pictures of these little hats and put them up on Flickr. And so and then people start liking these hats, and they start making more of the different hats, and because they're more popular, people buy more smoothies, and they can donate more to the causes. And it's a different way of looking at the economics now, of what do people like. They like the drinks, but they like the little hats too as well. There's an economy growing up around that. So some of the things to think about when you're looking at the likeonomics, and I think all of us are starting to say, how can we use these likes and the shares and all the different ways that you can denote that you actually care about something. Thinking about putting an economy behind that, I think, is one of the most important trends to harness over the next year. The second one is all the different new ways to sell. So I went on a rampage this past fall, and I signed up for all of the new shopping sites. And what do I mean? Well, all the special deals with special people. You don't have to be members of these new sites, like Guild Group, Rulala, Ideally, Facebook Deals. And there's so many different ways to buy. There's group buying, flash sales, member sales. It goes on and on and on. I don't know about you, but it's incredibly fun to go through all of these things. So just a show of hands. How many people have bought some from one of these sites? Okay. And how many people have just bought something in the past week? Okay, so quite a few, about half the people who raised their hands. So you can see the power of these things, where shopping actually becomes entertainment because of the scarcity and some of the game mechanics behind it. We'll talk about gaming in just a second. But it's more than that. It's also local sales. So Groupon. It's absolutely fantastic. Partly because it's sales that are more broad, but they're also becoming much more localized, especially with things like Living Social. And then also with store check-ins. Have anybody used Shopkick or Checkpoints? These are things that actually detect when you're in the store. So what retailers want to know more than anything else is, are you actually in the store itself? Not that you're just passing by, but did you walk in? And did you actually look at certain pieces of merchandise? So my kids and I love doing this now. We walk into Best Buy and we go around, we look at every single thing that we can scan, because he wants to get as many points as possible so he can plant more trees. And that's his reason for using Shopkick. I'm using it so I can get the best deals on the electronics. The other way to think about it is dynamic pricing. So Off and Away and Swoople, different ways where people are extending auctions. You can name your own price around travel deals. And then also you think of mobile price checking. How many of you went into a store like Barnes & Noble, scanned something, then bought it on Amazon this holiday season? Okay. I was shameless about it. And to the point where my husband was saying, please hide the camera. And so it's amazing you can do that. And you can also do it with eBay, with the developers platform now. So all these different new ways to sell, to buy. And the new kinds of user experiences that's creating, and also the disruption that causes, is tremendous. So I just want to give you one other way to think about this, and there's payment methods too, around Square and also Facebook credits. So Facebook credits only right now for gaming, and Facebook will continually say to the ends of the earth that it's only really for the games and apps and stuff that's on Facebook. But you can see where it's going to go. It's a currency that you'll be able to use, and it's fungible across any site. And as social commerce rises, It's one of our key things that we're looking at, is I think the Facebook credit is going to have tremendous value. So thinking about what that future, and I do think it's going to happen sometime this year, we actually will extend beyond the apps. So just want to give you an idea of how shopping would change. So we're talking about check-ins, right? You're checking in here. So one of the places where I find it really annoying is a place where I go every single week. And you all go to this store too as well, with some variation of it. It's Safeway. I walk into Safeway, right? And when do they actually know me? When do they actually know who I am? And I shop at Safeway every single week, multiple times a week. The only time they know it's me walking the store is when I'm paying with my loyalty card, when I'm checking out and ready to pay and walking out the door. And they spit all these, those coupons with me, which I just toss. So what I really want to have happen is I walk into the store, it knows who I am. With near-field communications on phones, or even me just checking in, with my phone, when I walk in that door, they know who I am. I pick up a cart, it's a smart cart. And actually it knows who I am, it probably knows my shopping list if I decided to link it to it. And then I can go around the store. It'll send me those coupons right when I walk in the door, instead of when I leave, when I can actually use them, when it can actually influence my purchase. And then even better, it's going to have GPS inside the store and tell me where in the aisles I should be going first, second, and third. And also, hey, by the way, stop at this point because it's a special deal just for you. Because we know everything that you bought over the past 5 years. We know what you will stop for, or do you not? So I think there's a real opportunity here for you to actually know me as a retailer, as a marketer. Don't just give me promotions that everyone else gets. You have an opportunity to know me because I've given you permission to. And I think this is one of the most disruptive trends. The things that I talk about, all these technologies, they all exist today. But it's going to take someone like a Safeway to piece it together. And the most interesting thing here, again, it's not the technology. It's about the disruption that they can cause in that value chain in terms of creating a new user experience for me, and also in terms of how can they increase the revenue streams because they know me better. I want to go on and talk about search, one of my favorite areas. I've been watching search for a long time, and it's been kind of boring, frankly. It's 10 blue links on a page, and it hasn't changed in 15 years. So what are the things that are going to change today? And you can see the proliferation of this. And you think I'm going to put Google up here, right, as a disruptive change? It's not. It's Bing. This is one company to watch. And one of the things I think they're doing so well is really understanding the whole social space. So, for example, they were one of the first ones to link search results back to your friends. So you can sign in onto Bing, and you can see, I just searched on Farmville because inevitably one of my Facebook friends is using Farmville, right? Sure enough, it's been friended by, I can't even read it from here, but by 2 people who actually looked at 2 different apps and links on there. So movies, books, whatever it is I'm searching for, if it's just randomly, it might happen to be something interesting that a friend might know about, and it's integrated into my search results. Some other examples of this, for example, is that you see more and more now the social sharing is being integrated into the ranking results. As everybody's looking at it, so Twitter, Facebook status updates, especially though I think the impact of this is going to be inside the enterprise. So enterprise search has always missed a lot of signal. There's not a lot of signal inside of links inside enterprise, not a lot of linking going on. There's a little bit of intelligence that you can say in terms of who uses it the most, maybe some tagging. But now if we have social intelligence on top of that, who actually is connected to you? The social signal that can happen inside a company can really take enterprise search to a totally different level. Now you can also think about creating social content. So how many of you are involved in search engine optimization as part of your jobs? Okay, a couple people here are. Social just wrecks the whole thing because you can't really influence social interactions directly on the page. It's very hard to SEO that. But one of the ways to do that, again, is to create a social content hub like a blog or a destination page of all of your social content so that it has a place to resolve itself, so that it's actually something that you can control and actually give you better page rank. And the last thing to think about, totally off the charts in some areas, but micro formats. How many of you use micro formats on your web pages? Do you have structured content on your site at all? So one of the most interesting things about Bing is that you go into here, if you do a local search, you can actually do things like reviews and look at things like, well, what's the ambience, what's the food quality like in a restaurant? And they use sentiment analysis to some extent, but they're also looking at micro formats inside of your pages to say, do you actually do that? So events have micro formats. People like reviews and products have micro formats. So being able to tag the content on your site with these micro formats with structured data makes it a lot easier for these structured search engines to be able to do some things here. And the stuff I'm talking about is stuff that's absolutely confirmed by the people at search engines. So these are things that they want to use to elevate the relevance of a particular page. And it's things, again, that you can use today to actually help you get better page rank. The next area is big data. So I think RepTrends, I was talking to them before earlier today, I think the social monitoring is going to be merging with web analytics. Whereas monitoring has been fairly static right now. It gives you a dashboard, gives you sentiment analysis. And I think, frankly, that a lot of the monitoring has been used by PR firms to justify, yeah, you're getting mentioned. Well, that doesn't help you get work done. And I think the real disruption is going to have when I can actually look at my value networks and say, where is it actually being mentioned, not only on my website, but throughout the entire ecosystem of wherever my brand may be mentioned, and the interactions that customers may have that I have absolutely no idea and control over, but I need to understand so I can potentially influence it and earn better rankings and positions for that. The other thing is this whole idea of big data. And so think about the data that you have just on your site and how we struggle just to analyze and understand all the information that's there. That's nothing compared to the social data that's being tossed off by the hundreds and thousands of people who are probably talking about your brands today. So think about the big data, technology like Hadoop, which is an open source Apache-based information that crunches data using network computers. It's sponsored and supported by people like Yahoo, but you also have people like Cassandra from Facebook, Dynamo from Amazon, and Bigtable by Google. All these new technologies that are fairly available and open to people. So that if you want to take advantage of this big data, all this rich data out there, you just have to think about what you would do with it. So let me give you an example. Twitter is being archived by the Library of Congress right now. Every single tweet. Archived. The historical data of that, look at the real-time stuff. The historical data is rich. You can get access to that. What would you do with it? What are the questions you would ask? The New York Times has its entire archives public. The Guardians has that available. And they have rich data. They're putting more and more data out there. What would you do with that if you had it available? So let me give you an example. Right now, you may be monitoring. Maybe somebody's mentioning your brand, asking you a question about a brand or a product that you have. What you would normally do with monitoring is you would write back to them and say, hey, can I answer your question? Here, great interaction, right? But you're not necessarily understanding who else in that person's network has answered that question already for them. That second order is really interesting. Who else has actually interacted with this person? But who is that person who's actually taken upon themselves to be acting on your behalf, to be an advocate on you? And who else has that person, by answering that question, influenced? And what are all the downstream aspects of that? That's big data that we are just beginning to tap. And I think the real opportunity here is you don't have to be a big company to use big data. So if you look what Facebook did, they understood not only that you can have connections between people, but those connections had meaning. And they put in the algorithms to be able to understand that so they could write a better newsfeed. It took them a little while to do them, and they felt like, hey, we can actually do something with that. It was newsfeed that really catapulted Facebook to where it is today. Same thing with Google. Really simple insight. Links have meaning. It's not really hard, but they actually started writing the algorithms to do this. Now in the past, you had to have really big machines and really big algorithms to do this. Now, you have a lot of technology available to you on an open source basis, free, that you can use. The key question is, can you ask the right questions? So that's big data. And then also I think one other thing is all the new data visualization tools are making it so much easier to make sense of this data. And then the last thing is also, I think a really important thing is how do you balance out privacy and personalization? Because people always want more personalized things, but they have to give up privacy in order to do that. So how do you balance that in terms of the user experience? I'm going to go on and talk about enterprise social networking. So these are all the various players, and there's tons more, but I put these guys as the biggest ones. And the idea of social networking inside the enterprise is something that's really, I think, about to take hold. And in particular, because it's something, they all have based this one idea. They're all trying to be Facebook, easy to use interfaces. They all look like Facebook. They all have likes and comments. So it's a very easy translation in terms of a user experience into the enterprise. What I find interesting, though, is that inside the enterprise, people just want to talk to each other. They need a tremendous amount of more context to be able to make meaning. So my company uses Socialcast, but we're only 12 people. So it's not that hard for us to find meaning, because we talk to each other and connected with each other enough. I have done this really unfortunate habit on Facebook where I accepted every single friend invite that I got. So I hit the 5,000 friend limit earlier this year, at the end of December. And so what happens is my news feed is pretty much useless. But it also emulates what would happen if I was a 5,000 person, I was in a 5,000 person company. And what would happen to my news feed if I was following everybody, if I could see the entire stream? It'd be useless to me. And what I really want to do is to see the stream by subjects, by my friends from different places, by subjects around projects, around accounts, around research topics that I'd be looking at, and then being able to segment that. And unfortunately, things like Facebook and things like that don't necessarily exist. So I think enterprise inside the social network, social networking inside the enterprise is going to have a very different flavor than what we experience in our personal lives. It has to be much more structured. It has to be almost in some ways locked down in terms of how people use it. And it has to be very directed to give people the reason of saying, you know, we're going to use this for this purpose to give it meaning, because otherwise it won't matter. I want to go and talk about gamification. So how many of you went to the gamification conference? I think it was last week or something. So a couple people did. So gamification is looking at game mechanics and saying, where can it actually move inside different environments? And so there was the gamification summit, and there were a bunch of players out there who are becoming gaming platforms. For people like Bunchball, Badgeville, I'll just name them real quick, Big Door, Gamify, iActionable, and Scavenger, are all creating games for businesses. From a marketing perspective, they're becoming game platforms. So they can take your website and put a game on it. They can put a leaderboard on it. They can do lots of different things. What I think is interesting about this is something very similar to what I just talked about before, enterprise social networking. What if you could take work and gamify it? What if you could take work and instead of saying, okay, we've got to get this project done, what if you could make it a game? How much more fun would work be? It'd be really fun, right? So I think that the whole idea of gamification is what if you could take it and extend game mechanics beyond just the games we play, into marketing, into the services you provide on an everyday basis. It really changes things. And this is, again, going back to that user experience. Can you have people connect in different ways, in new ways? So if you think about Foursquare, how many of you are mayors of a particular place? Oh, some people are really into being a mayor. You are proud of the fact that you're a mayor of someplace, right? So I never got into this. I was like, why would I ever care to be the mayor of something, right? And then I got a badge for going on one of those river tour buses. I'm like, this is cool, I got a badge for something. And so you start realizing that it's kind of cool, the psychic value of this. And the games that go behind it is a huge motivator for people to be able to connect, to brag, to say, hey, I'm the mayor of something. So what if you could be the mayor of a project at work? Would that make life more interesting or not? Okay, so, and then I think it's hot because people are connecting in new ways. We go on about talking about extending print. Print. Who cares about print anymore? It's so boring. It's portable. It doesn't have to be charged or anything. And I was just at my book publisher talking about, old media books. How do you extend it? Well, there are things like QR codes, and I like this example because you can actually degrade up to about 13% of the QR codes and put branding like BBC into it before it degrades. So you can use this for marketing purposes. And I think the problem with QR codes is how many of you actually have QR code readers on your phones? Okay, so quite a few of you. And when's the last time you used it? Okay. Now, this is really big in Japan and in other parts of Asia. And it's because they've actually put, again, it's a very mobile-driven society. And the marketers there have actually created a culture around these QR codes. And actually the key to that was that these QR readers were built into the phones. So I think the new BlackBerry Messenger, if you download it, you actually have a QR code reader in it, built into it. But my iPhone still doesn't have it. My Android doesn't have it. You have to download it. And talk about being easy to use. Does that meet that criteria? No, it doesn't. So I think QR codes in this society today is going to be a really hard thing to penetrate. And we were talking about generations of phones before QR codes, I think, can really take over. So not so much of a great thing right now. But here's another technology. Again, it still requires a download, but it's much more widely used. And it's Google Goggles. Anybody play with this? It's really cool. You take a picture of something and it scans it and it goes, hey, I can do a search on it right now. It's a scanned bag of potato chips and found all the links. The problem with this, do I really want a bunch of links? No. I want to know the calorie content in this darn thing. I want to know what harmful things or how good is that going to be. I want to see ratings and reviews. I want to see it in context. So this is missing context. So where's Nina? So you're doing a lot of work around this, around how to extend print. So talk to her. She's been doing a lot of research around how to extend this, especially around magazines. But I think this has a lot of potential because this is not saying I have to change anything about my print. I just have to make my print smarter and be able to train and talk about users to say, is there value here? And it's really about new types of value, not just doing a search on something. It's really about doing that image recognition and then saying, what's the value in the context of where I am? I'm sitting in a Safeway and I'm scanning something. Why would I be scanning something at that particular point? Probably because I want to see what the nutritional content is. Versus if I'm in Barnes & Noble, what I want to see. Maybe something else completely different. So I think, again, some of the interesting things around this to watch is if you are a brand and you are going to be seeing this, what kind of information do you want showing up here next to you from an SEO perspective? Or if you're a brand using print and you're actually having your ad scan, what kind of information do you want having showing up with that particular image? So as you're developing your print campaigns, the colors that you use, the images that you use can actually have meaning in of themselves. So next thing is around curation. So curation is one of those things that used to be in the hands of a very small number of people, but I think it's rapidly changing. So there's a site called Paperlay, where you can create your own daily paper just simply by putting in your Twitter handle. So you can say, what are people saying? What are people doing? I was at the launch for Tibber, which is one of those social networking sites, and I just put in the hashtag Tibber because people were talking a lot about it on Monday. And it was great. It put up a screenshot of it, some headlines, some bloggers, some tweets, all put into one place. And you know, TIPCO could have just put this out there as one of the links. Hey, get the latest news without lifting a single finger, simply by using the hashtag, curation hashtag of Tibber. So I can go in there, I can choose who I want to have in there. I can create it based on the list. I can create an altimeter paper looking at all the tweets of people inside of altimeter. So different ways to actually curate that. Another site that I really like a lot is Storify. And what they do is they allow you to create stories by pulling in different searches. So you can do a search on a particular story. This is clout. So they wanted to go and look at some content that people were talking about clout. So they go and find, okay, there was a tweet here, there was a YouTube video there, there's a Facebook status update here. Cut and paste, insert some text into there, publish it. Quick and easy. So right now, how many of you labor over blog posts? It's hard work. But what if I could go out there and simply just curate a conversation, pull out the meaning from my audience and quickly publish something? I think the number of people who would actually create content would be much greater. So I look at curation as a very interesting trend because if you can turn more and more of your customers into curating for your audience, instead of just being advocates saying, great, I love that product, they can go out there and actually show all the ways that people are looking at that product. They can actually be content producers for you by making it really light and easy for them to do that. A couple more. How many have gone to a hashtag chat before? Anybody here? A couple people have. These are chats and conversations that are around a certain group and topic, around a certain hashtag, that meets at a certain time every week, certain time and certain date and time. So this is one around the leadership chat. So it's great because these are all people interested in leadership. A couple hundred people show up and we just chat about leadership. As an author, I'm going on a virtual book tour around all of these things. I just ride to all the different places talking about interactive media, leadership, strategy, and I say, hey, would you like me to come in and do a chat with you guys sometimes? Now, there was a calendar for all of this, and there's shorts, and I just put a bit.ly together, this hashtag chat list. It's a Google Doc, and you can see all the different chats, what time the schedules are, and you can just start just following that particular hashtag. You can join in the conversation. The reason I put this out there, again, this is not, really a big trend, but I think it could be very powerful. Because what if you could actually create hashtags around a particular topic and create a community around that? Getting people to talk to each other in a way they never had before. And just by curating a particular hashtag, but more than that, saying, meet at an appointed time and place so we can talk to each other. You don't have to get on a plane, get on a webinar, just go tweet. And it's archived too as well. So people are taking these things and you can see web files, or every week you can go read the chats too from people. And then if you have the conversations actually using some of the software, you can actually see how the conversations are splintering or supporting each other and people replying back and forth to each other. So I think this is an interesting way that if you wanted to get your message out there, go and find some of these chats, start participating in them, or even set up your own chats. So right now there are about 240 or so of them. Which if you think about all the topics in the world that you could talk about, is minuscule. So I think this is a key trend to be watching. Just two more. How many of you use in Quora? It's just taken off over the past couple of weeks. Started in June of this year, and it's just Q&A. I mean, there's been Yahoo Answers, right? LinkedIn Answers. What's the big deal about this? The big deal about this is that it's quality. So there was this one guy I wrote about in Groundswell where he would just answer questions all the time inside of Yahoo Answers just so he'd be on the leaderboard. He was totally playing the game. He would just answer things in less than 5 words. Not very good quality, right? Whereas on this, one of the first questions that they asked, and they were very careful about who they let in. Somebody asked a question, how many discs did AOL distribute in the 90s? And you know who answered? Steve Case. I think you would know. And then the person who also chimed in was his head of marketing. So these are really high quality answers from people. And they're deep, they're long, and people can vote the best answers up and down. And the people who vote on them, they have weights associated with them. And what's really fascinating is you not only see the conversation, here's something about Intel, it's a whole conversation around Intel. But they also create, anytime there's a question around that particular topic, they also create a Twitter question feed around it. So it's @Q_Intel. So any topic, they will also create a feed around that so you can follow this feed. And what happens is tremendous, fantastic search engine optimization. Brilliant. So if you're looking for a particular question or answer, you go into this. So of course, I was doing all my searches, right? Top trends, disruptive trends. I kept coming across Quora questions and answers. It was one of the best places and sources for these things, not blog posts, but people answering questions inside. It was highly authoritative. Now, what do you do about this? So my colleague Jeremiah wrote a blog post about it. He basically said 2 things. You got to monitor your brand. Is your brand being mentioned on here? And you can look for this and get alerted to this. So when is your brand being mentioned? When are people answering? And because the quality of these questions are really, really high, you want to be prepared to go and answer these questions too as well. You want to be part of those conversations. And you have to engage, though not by promoting, but by being helpful. So it's kind of interesting. It has a very strong bent around Wikipedia to it, where it's not about pushing your brand, but it's really trying to answer these questions. Because if you start pushing your brand and going there and do marketing, guess what's going to happen to your answer? It's going to get voted down. You don't want that to happen. So it's very interesting. I think the way that they designed this, again, these are Facebook alums, they really thought about the social dynamics behind this. And I put it as one of those disruptive trends because it took a look at that user experience and really blows it out the door. New, completely new experience. And the first time I saw it, I'm like, This is another Q&A site. But you dig down into it, and it's really actually quite helpful. And again, the SEO on it is fantastic. One last one, and then I'll move on to another topic. It's DIY, do-it-yourself, and co-creation. We talk about co-creation, open innovation, but I think the underlying trend is something in society. How many of you have ever been to Maker Faire down in San Mateo? I am like a die-hard attendee of that thing. I drag my family, go to it for both days, and it's all about what can you make, what can you do with your own hands. And what the internet has really done is really given us a sense of empowerment and enablement. And so what's interesting is the first one I have in upper left-hand corner is Connect and Develop from P&G. Back in 2000, they decided that they could not be the source of innovation anymore, and they had to open up. So they have, as an organization, really encouraged people to come in and create new ideas. What was just as fascinating is they have a lot of ideas that they can't use, so they want other people to go and take it. So how many of you use I'm forgetting, the Glad super wrap thing? It's kind of like sticky on the side. That came from P&G, and they sold it to Clorox, which is a competitor of theirs. And they formed a new joint venture. So two competitors forming this stuff using P&G technology they couldn't use, but Glad could, which is a division of Clorox. Ponoco is a site where you can go and design things. You can use a CAD system, send it to them, they will make it for you. So they have 3D printers that they can do. They can fabricate things, not only just out of physical materials, but also making them out of electronics. And so they make these one-off things, and then if you want to manufacture them, they can also do that too as well. And this is ModCloth. It's a retailer. But what I love about this, they can be the buyer. You can help merchandise the store. So they put up things like, here's a handbag. What do you think about it? Would you do it? Would you pass on it? Would you pick it? Why would you pick it? And if enough people say they pick it, okay, great. It gets into the store ends. And so this is curation. This is store of the community being built by people. And I think the more and more you bring people into that process, where you remove the walls that define what the enterprise is, and you say, there's no longer a firewall. And you say, where can you actually create products like a Threadless? Can you actually help with the curation? Can you set the prices? Do you provide customer support? Well, it starts redefining what is a company and what is an enterprise. And I think this is going to be one of the most interesting things that have happened, because this disrupts not only the user experience, but also that value chain that I talked about. Where is value created? Who actually creates it? And at what cost? And so, again, I think one of the very interesting trends to be thinking about, what can you give up inside of your organization? What would you actually start letting go in order to be disruptive in your ecosystem? So one area that I do want to talk about that's been hot, people ask me this all the time, is augmented reality. So very hot in 2009, kind of went dormant in 2010. There is a conference coming up in Santa Clara in May for an augmented reality event. And a couple of things, and this is probably the most promising. This is in the Lego kiosk if you went to the Hillsdale Mall. They had this for a while. You could hold up a box of Legos, and then it would pop up the actual image of what that Lego would look like built. And you could rotate it around and see a 3D build of what that Lego box, what that Lego kit would look like. And absolutely fantastic in context in the store, that I think was really fantastic. I think most of us are looking at, have seen sort of the mobile applications where you can hold up, we would look at the geolocation, understand the compass bearings, and be able to give you information of the street. That hasn't really passed through because it's hard to actually understand what the context is. And everybody was trying to experiment with this. So this is another version of it. This is when somebody, it's called Word Lens, and you can hold up a sign, and you can look at it through your camera, and it'll do instantaneous translation. So unlike Google Goggles where they take a picture and then it would translate, this does it in real time. So it's looking at image recognition and then linking it back to OCR and then back into, again, a language dictionary. And you can imagine what this does for if you're traveling, to be able to say, what does that sign say? So they have it in Spanish or have some other languages. Some of the early testing says it doesn't work that great. I don't know if any of you have actually used it or not. It's not that great, but I think the potential is there. Really interesting thing. And then the last example, which I think has some interesting potential, is the windshield augmented reality. It's actually built into windshield. So this is something from GM. where actually it's built into your glass. So instead of having to look at this GPS, it's actually superimposed onto the view of what you're actually looking at. So it's hard to see, but it's a yellow turn. You've seen all those things on the screens. It's actually on your windshield and superimposed on the road. It tells you exactly go through that street. If you've ever taken one of those roundabouts, trying to figure out which roundabout do I take, this will really help that problem. But you can see that one of the biggest problems around this is that it's just not ready for prime time yet. The problem is that the scanning technology is just not quite there yet to be able to match what the devices are that are using it. So I think one of the first things will be the in-store kiosks and then moving on to these other devices. But it's just not one of those things where I think many people will be spending a lot of time. Definitely something to pay attention to, but not to prioritize. So this is a quick summary of those things. I put all those 11 things that I thought were pretty hot right now. I looked at user experience, business model, and value networks, and gave checks basically in terms of how I thought they were actually changing some of those paradigms. And so you can see some of them are hotter than others, but I think it goes back to how do you prioritize your key efforts this year on these disruptive technologies? Which of these will make the biggest difference inside of your organization? Because that's what really matters. And also, which of these will be the biggest impact, both internally and externally? So I give two other, excuse me, two bonus areas to think about. These are not necessarily trends, but I think they're extremely important. And the first one is around transparency. And again, I think one of the things that we saw with Domino's, I thought it was absolutely fantastic from a marketing perspective. They said, we know our pizza doesn't taste very good. It tastes like cardboard. And we hear about it day in, day out. And the CEO said, well, darn it, we're going to do something about it. And so they went out and started redesigning the entire pizza. Focus groups, what do we do it? They went to the kitchen, got the head chef, and they documented all of it. And they were transparent about that. And it was so refreshing. They put out videos about how do we actually shoot, what it looks like, the pizza. And all the mechanics that go into making a pizza look really good. Like, we're not going to do that. We want to see your pizza. So they have this whole site called Show Us Your Pizza. So this site, I think what they really did is they put a whole new paradigm on marketing to say, could you actually do good by your customers by being transparent? To say, hey, we're not very good at this, but we're going to get better, and we're going to show you, and we're going to take it, and we're going to admit it. How many of you have seen some of these campaigns from Domino's? Okay, some of you have. I encourage you to take a look at that and say, what will you be transparent about this year in order to gain trust of your customers? Because I think that's one of the most powerful trends that you can do that can be absolutely disruptive in the way that you work with your customers. The other thing is, WikiLeaks. Okay, so let's talk about WikiLeaks. Most of you aren't probably going to be touched by WikiLeaks this year, unless you work for Bank of America. It looks like they're going to be targeted next. But some people left WikiLeaks because they just couldn't stand working with Julian. They started Open Leaks. And then there's trade leaks, and there's Indo leaks, and Balkan leaks, and Brussels leaks, which is the monkey piss, which is kind of funny. The idea here is that this is going to proliferate. And now WikiLeaks is working with 20 different newspapers, and New York Times is thinking of setting up their own whistleblowing place and technology to be able to take these leaks in. So how many of you think that you have any leaks that you're worried about in your organization? How many of you worried about leaks? So a couple people. Okay, here's the other question. How many of you have gone to Glassdoor? Okay, what's going on Glassdoor? What are people are talking about their salaries. They're talking about their bosses. They're talking about all the nasty thing that goes on in your company. And it's all anonymous. So if you don't think leaks are happening already, you're mistaken. This is not happening at WikiLeaks level. Yeah, guys,
Who's going to admit lots of things in front of your competition in this room? That's a better question.
I'm sorry, say it again?
Who's going to admit
mistakes
in front of your competitors in this room right
Well,
now?
I look at it this way. If you're a competitor, you knew you made a mistake, wouldn't you point it out to you? It's one of those things where what amazes me isn't that fact that there are so few, that the people aren't leaking, that the leaks are out there. what amazes me is that when all of your employees have access to Facebook and blogs and Twitter and everything, that there aren't more leaks happening already. That's a really astounding thing to me. So I think this is going to be a huge trend this year. There's been a social moray that you don't talk about these things. But now, because of WikiLeaks, it's actually saying, you know, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about salaries, which has traditionally been very taboo. We're going to talk about the dirty laundry that's out there. And the only way you can do about it, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. So in this era of transparency, what do you do? Do you do it to yourself first, or do you wait to have it done to you? And the other way to think about it is, if you ever thought that you could keep your dirty laundry behind closed doors, you can't anymore. And so I think this is going to be a wake-up call for corporate America to really clean up their act. It's really a very interesting thing to say, there is absolute transparency now. There are no more firewalls. No matter how many we set up, you can't have total security. The second thing that goes behind, and I'm sorry, here's Glassdoor. So the second thing around this is a real passion of mine, which is around leadership. Because the key thing that leaders ask me all the time in relation to those leaks is this: how do I get control? Or how do I feel comfortable with this idea that I can't control this anymore? Because everything that I know about leadership, about business, is about controlling risk, about controlling the outcomes of things. That's what I'm paid to do. And the whole idea of open leadership is this, is how do you be out of control but still in command? And it's a fundamental question, because I think the first and the most important thing to figure out is that you aren't in control and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't get it back. So the question is, what can you control? So let's go back to those employees. Why do employees spill leaks? Why do they tell all the company's secrets? Because they're unhappy, they want to get revenge, all this angst that happens inside the organization. Well, what do you do about that then? How do you get back in command of that situation? You can't control what that person says. Well, you gotta make them happy. Kind of seems counterintuitive in some ways, but yeah, you do have to go back to the root of the problem and really address it. So a lot of the work I do with executives is say, you know, let's go take a look at Glassdoor. You have never looked at it. You have no idea what your employees are saying about you, why they're happy or not happy. In fact, you're named 8 of these posts as being a bad manager. Look at that. What are you going to do about it? And it's that question, what are you going to do about it, is that probably the hardest thing to do. So I think the biggest disruption that's going to happen in many organizations, again, that transparency, and it's also the impact that's going to have on people in leadership positions, because it's going to be extremely earth-shattering for them, that they have to rethink that the way they lead. So I think, again, in the idea of just preparing for disruption, I think this quote from Charles Darwin really sums it up. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. And so the change is happening around you. The question becomes not just saying, you know, am I smart enough to outwit it? Am I strong enough? Do I have enough momentum inside the industry to just weather that storm? It says also, how can I adapt to this? How can I anticipate what that disruption, what it would do to my business? And how do I, instead of fearing it, wrap myself around it so that I can survive better than everyone else in the industry? So this is my contact information. If you want slides, send me an email to slides@ultravitagroup.com and I will send you back the deck, a link to it. Hope you go buy the book, shameless plug. And at this point, I would love to take questions. And I can talk anything about anything I've talked about here. I would love to see if you think I've missed anything, have a discussion around that. I call it sort of Jeopardy hour. So I'll take mobile technologies for 300.